These days, when people ask me if I have any siblings, I just say no. But I used to, just for a while. Tommy was my little brother, and by the time he was 3, we were best buddies. I remember how we used to wake up at about 5 a.m. on Saturdays to watch cartoons and kick up a hell of a ruckus until mom and dad booted us out of the house. Then we'd go play on our swing set, or maybe try to skip stones at the creek, or just run around. But he got sick that next fall. It wasn't anything too bad, just a common cold, or so we thought. My parents didn't really do anything about it, they just figured they'd let it run its course. Poor kid probably went through a pack and a half of Kleenex a day, but that didn't help any. He was sneezing every other minute, spewing his snot all over the place, and I wouldn't have spent much time around him if my parents didn't make me. That's how we ended up in the garage that day. We went to run around, but because of his cold, Tommy got tired after just a few minutes. We were heading back inside when he sneezed on me. Call it the straw that broke the camel's back. All of a sudden, he started yelling about his cold and how gross it was to sneeze on everything and everyone. He sneezed on me again, and that's when he really lost it. My dad had a pegboard of tools on the wall. Tommy reached up and grabbed a hammer, then he hit himself in the face with it a good 4 or 5 times, until he was down. Then he hit himself again, and again, and again. Smack, 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 crunch. I think I was in shock until then. I literally couldn't believe what had just happened. When I did, I went to help Tommy, but I stopped when I got closer to him. I tried to write about what his face looked like a few times. Couldn't do it. All I can say is that his nose was smashed, along with his teeth and the front of his face. His skull was basically opened up. But something was moving there. Something moved past a part of his skull, and for a while I thought it was a huge living booger. And in a way, it was. It was a slug. The first of a few that the doctors said were living in his nasal cavity. All the slime they were producing, that's what was making him sneeze so much. Because of the way it happened, I think my parents told everyone that Tommy died in an accident. I'm not really sure, and they're not around for me to ask them what they said. My friends from school didn't buy that, so they asked me how Tommy really died. I told them the same thing that I told the cops, which is the crap that I just wrote. But that's not how Tommy really died. See, Tommy couldn't have reached Dad's hammer, but me, I could. The following is a true account of events. When I was a kid, we lived way out in the country. My dad would find what looked like stone tools, hatchets, blades, and arrowheads buried in various places on the property while he was pulling up weeds and brush. When I was about 6 and my brother was 8, he slept in the top bunk and would wake up screaming about a spider lady wrapping him in a web. Obviously, we all wrote it off as a bad dream. Over the years, there was something eerie about the place. We had friends come over for sleepovers and such. These friends grew up deep in the cut too, some of them living in the middle of the woods. We would play a game at night to see who could get close to the tree line and maybe even pass over the threshold. I think the longest anyone ever spent in those woods was 5 minutes, and they would all return terrified. They would all say the same thing. They felt like they were surrounded by peering eyes and phantom footsteps. That was generally the vibe of the woods there, like they were watching you. About 25 years later, my brother and I are staying up late getting hammered at my dad's lake house. Sitting there at the kitchen table, we started getting sentimental and talking about all the things we were scared of on that property. We both talked about the bizarre and frightening dreams we would have. He mentioned the spider lady, and I mentioned the stone tools Dad would find. We theorized that the land likely belonged to a native tribe at some point. Alcohol had an opposite effect on me, than it does most people. It tends to hype me up, so I stayed up that night researching tribes in the area. I found out that the county we lived in was once occupied by the Sioux people, who have a tale of a Spider-Man, Iktom, who deceives and plays tricks on unsuspecting victims. I sent this research to my brother, and he hasn't spoke of it since. The first time I went to the doctor for my eating habits was at age 12. My parents had been concerned that I had some type of thyroid issue because I would eat my way through the fridge without gaining a single pound. I was just never satisfied. By the time I reached 15, I was seeing a psychologist for what my mom described as a full-blown food addiction. They wanted me to treat the root cause, but when it comes down to it, I just really like food. It's like my stomach is a black hole. They kicked me out the moment I turned 18, said I was too expensive to keep around. Even when I'd go over to their house for a family dinner, they'd ration me and cut me off after I went back for thirds. They stopped inviting me over when they finally noticed I had been stealing from their pantry on the way out. Luckily for me, I met my wife when I was 23 and running out of money. I didn't know why she wanted me. She was out of my league. She made 6 figures, and for the most part, we were able to earn enough to keep my appetite satisfied. I could tell she was concerned about my intake, but she never said a word, probably because my weight never changed. When she got pregnant with Lucy, she had the typical pregnancy cravings, but somehow I still managed to eat more than her. We ended up making late night trips to Taco Bell and Wendy's on my behalf more than hers. When Lucy was born, finances got a little tight. We had another mouth to feed. The expenses that went to groceries for me started going to baby food and supplies. I'm still not sure if my wife ever noticed the charges on our bank account for my personal shopping trips. Lucy was 6 when my wife died from breast cancer. That's when things took a turn for the worst. I used food to cope. Finances got even tighter. Then it happened. The recession. The layoffs. It's been 2 years since the stock market crashed, and poverty in the country is at an all-time high. It's like a post-apocalyptic era with the amount of looting and rioting. There's barely enough food for the 2 of us. I've been starving, even with the extra stash I've hidden from Lucy. Last week, for the first time ever, I lost a pound. We ran out of food 3 days ago. My stomach is gnawing at me. I can tell I have probably lost another pound or 2, but my body still looks healthy compared to Lucy's withered away state. I am so hungry. Deep down, I knew it would come to this. I've been staring at Lucy, and although it pains me, I think it's finally time. I need to do it while she still has some amount of meat left on her bones.